Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of League Unlock, and thank you for hanging out. My name is Eric, as we have reached the final installment, or the final trio of power rankings when it comes to the LCK. Only three remain. You know what the three are, but the order remains a mystery as we go through them, and these are the main guys fighting for the LCK crown in spring, the main contenders. And if you heard even before when we were talking about Dragon X in at number 4, that is still a team that I wouldn't be shocked if we saw them lifting the LCK trophy in 2020. So even though these are your, S tier or your main top 3, there's even some of these tier below teams that absolutely have a chance of taking home the crown. Starting with number 3, and these three are very difficult to rank. We're going to preface it by saying that you could argue any which way for all of them, but for us, number 3 is T1 in their rebrand, the back-to-back champions from 2019. Yes, they maintained 3/5 of that roster, but when you lose the MVP from your squad and the MVP from the number 1 seed at Worlds, the team that represented Korea at the mid-season invitational, it's going to put a bit of a damper on your team's outlook. And if a bit of a damper on your team's outlook is 3rd heading into the season, well, then obviously you're doing something right. And T1 has done it about the best of any organization or any team in the history of the game. So yes, they are held to a much higher standard, and Cuz is going to likely be a downgrade from Clid. We've talked about that countless times. Not too concerned about Cuz holding his own and quickly showcasing why he should be spoken of in that upper echelon of junglers within the LCK. He's going to be just fine on this roster. Roach and, of course, Canna we saw at the Kespa Cup. Whatever combo of top laner that's going to be sent out for SKT, and that, by the way, very likely going to be split somewhat evenly, I feel like, because Canna, we know that Coach Kim absolutely loves developing young talent in the top lane who are incredibly aggressive and have super high ceilings. That is exactly what Canna is, more so than Roach, who is that safer approach. And I've seen some people compare it to Duke and the Shy, where Duke is the more safe one, the Shy is aggressive. That's a fair comparison, except they are not even close to that same level. With Con and Clid out, though, more pressure is going to be falling on Faker and Teddy. And I think Faker, because they had such a stacked roster last year, you saw him take a back seat, really, which is something that we haven't really seen him do throughout the entirety of his career. He played more tanks, eventually supportive characters, eventually, he did get to unleash the assassins when the playoff run came around. But if you look at the entire year for Faker, individually, it's one of the weaker ones that we've seen from him, and that's because, let me get this straight, he has had the best career of all time. He is always looked at as the very best. Every other player in the game judges their career based on Faker. And the playoff run that he had in summer was fantastic, but we forget the regular season he struggled, and you could probably talk about him as the 4th or 5th best mid laner in the LCK during the regular season. So if he can maintain that summer playoff form, which, listen, I have no doubt in my mind that Faker can still be a peak performer and one of the best mids in the entire world, and he probably will be, but I think a lot of resources, a lot of emphasis should be going on Teddy. We've already seen at times when he is the featured carry, he can absolutely deliver. He is incredibly consistent for a lot of these team fights in the mid to late game, and even in laning phase. Him and Effort, him and Mata, they're never losing lane or going behind at all. They might not be stomping down there, but they are never even close to a liability. So Con and Clid out of the roster, more pressure goes on to Teddy, more pressure goes on to Faker to carry, because there is that glaring question mark in that top lane. And when some of the other squads have pretty darn good top laners, that is going to be a big concern for T1 coming into this split, and is one of the reasons why they're number 3 as opposed to, number 1 as the back-to-back champs. But so many rosters have changed. So much of the landscape has shifted heading into this split. And one of the biggest ones is the big boss of SKT. Coma is not going to be there. And that is the first time we will be seeing them in the LCK without him being there. And that, I mean, how's that going to affect him? How's that going to affect Faker? He's never played for a different coach. The synergy behind the scenes, the pick band that Faker and Coma developed over the years was one of the biggest strengths that T1 has had, and you saw in all the behind the scenes that Riot and T1 have done. The relationship there, it's been years that they've been developing that, so who knows how that's going to fit. Obviously, Coach Kim is a more than serviceable backup or replacement for Coma. 3 different teams to Worlds is something not even Coma can say, but that is absolutely incredible. We'll see what the pick ban changes look like, and communication is going to be a question mark for T1. There's still a lot of things that need to be figured out, which is why they're not immediately there as number 1 again, even though they won 2 splits last year and they fell to G2 on both occasions in the semifinals at MSI and at Worlds. And of course, G2 ended up being one of the best teams. I'm still going to say the best team of 2019, even though they got completely smacked by FPX in the World Finals. G2, what an incredible run. So it's not a huge disappointment, of course, that T1 ended up losing to them in back-to-back best-of-5s, but I just don't think the expectations should be as high for this roster as they were last preseason, when this super team was built around Faker with a combination of veterans and Mata and Khan. Obviously, Faker, veteran himself in the mid lane, and then Teddy finally getting to prove himself on a solid roster, and Clid was really the most unproven and biggest question mark coming into that roster at that point, and he ended up being the most important, the most consistent, and the best overall player for that roster throughout all of 2019. He got MVP during that incredible playoff run where, of course, they had to completely run the table and go through the entire wild card every single round. Clid was phenomenal throughout. The entire team was, and that's why they were sweeping people left, right, and center. But they're going to be a contender for the title, but I don't think that with these changes and all the question marks coming in, I don't think T1 should be the favorites for spring.